On a wet night in the spring of 1999, an aircraft that was never supposed to be seen was flying over Eastern Europe. It had no curves for a radar to catch, a shape designed to make it almost invisible, and a reputation that bordered on myth. For more than a decade, this kind of aircraft had flown into the most heavily defended airspace on the planet and come home every single time. That night, something on the ground was waiting for it. An air defense crew, using a missile system older than some of the people operating it, had spent years studying how to catch the uncatchable. They had learned to switch their radar on for only seconds at a time to look in exactly the right place at the right moment. And on that night, the gamble worked. 2 missiles climbed into the dark. The invisible aircraft was hit, and it came down. The first and only time a stealth aircraft of its kind has ever been brought down in combat. The lesson was not that stealth had failed. The lesson was about the thing that beat it, a network of radars, missiles, and crews whose entire purpose is to make a piece of sky too dangerous to enter. This is the story of air defense, the weapon that decides where air power is allowed to go. Every ranking of the world's great air forces measures what they can put into the air. This is about the opposite question. Not what flies, but what can stop it from flying. The surface-to-air missile and the system built around it is the reason the most expensive aircraft ever built still plan their routes around patches of ground they are not allowed to cross. To understand why a missile on a truck can frighten a billion-dollar aircraft, you have to follow a sequence that must work perfectly, in order, in seconds. Crews call it the kill chain. It begins with detection. A large search radar sweeps the sky, throwing out radio energy and listening for the faint echo that comes back off an aircraft. This radar is not precise. It does not know exactly where you are. But it can see far, hundreds of kilometers, and its only job is to answer one question. Is something out there, and roughly where? This is why search radars are often huge. Range comes from raw power and antenna size, and a radar that can see a small target far away is, by its nature, a large and obvious thing that is hard to hide. Once something is out there, a second, sharper radar takes over. A tracking and engagement radar locks onto the target and follows it precisely. Its position, its speed, its heading, updating constantly. This is the dangerous moment. The wide searching beam has narrowed into a tight one, pointed straight at you, and it is no longer asking whether you exist. It is solving for where you will be. Then the system decides whether you are inside the envelope, the volume of sky the missile can actually reach in time. Too far, too high, or too low, and you are safe. Inside it, the launch order can be given. The missile leaves the rail and accelerates to several times the speed of sound. For most of its flight, it is flown from the ground, or by the tracking radar, toward a point in space where it and the target will meet. In the final seconds, many missiles switch on their own seeker in the nose and finish the intercept themselves. And it almost never needs to hit you. A proximity fuse senses the instant it is closest and detonates a warhead that throws out a cloud of high-speed fragments. The aircraft simply flies into the cloud. Detect, track, engage, intercept. When every link holds, the sky reaches up and pulls an aircraft out of it. Break any one link in that chain, and the whole thing fails. Almost everything else in air warfare is a fight over those 4 links. So what is the machine that does all this? Strip away the secrecy. And an air defense system is really just four things that travel together. There is the search radar that finds, the engagement radar that tracks and guides, the launchers, each holding several missiles ready to fire, and a command post that ties them together and decides what to shoot and when. Spread these across a few vehicles and you have a battery, the basic building block of air defense. The missile itself is a small, expendable aircraft built for one single flight. A rocket motor for speed, fins to steer hard enough to chase a maneuvering jet, a guidance section that listens for the radar or thinks for itself, and a warhead with a fuse that decides the exact instant to go off. Everything about it is optimized to spend 90 seconds alive and arrive at one point in the sky. And the number that matters most is the envelope. Every missile has a maximum range, but also a minimum one. Get too close, and it cannot turn fast enough to catch you. It has a ceiling and a floor in altitude. Inside that shell of air, your odds are bad, and pilots train their whole careers to read the edge of it and stay on the right side. And not all of these systems are the same. Some are built to reach far out, threatening aircraft 100 kilometers away or more. Others are small and short-ranged, meant to protect a single base or bridge from anything that slips through. The long reach and the short reach do very different jobs. A long-range system is expensive, complex, and precious, a strategic weapon you cannot afford to lose. A short-range one is cheaper, more mobile, and exists by the dozen. One sets the outer boundary of the threat. The other makes sure nothing survives the last few kilometers. And the real trick, as we will see, is putting them together. Because here is the problem with any single system, no matter how good. It can be avoided. Fly under it, around it, or simply throw more targets at it than it has missiles. And one battery is just one obstacle. The answer is not a better battery. The answer is layers. Picture 3 rings around something worth protecting. The outer ring is long range. It forces attackers to start worrying about defense while they are still far away. Inside, it sits a medium-range layer to catch what gets closer. And at the center, short-range systems and shoulder-fired missiles guard the last few kilometers. Each layer covers the other's blind spots. Now spread those layered sights across a map, overlapping, so there is no seam to fly through. No corridor where all the radars happen to be looking the wrong way. Stitch them together with a command network that shares one picture of the sky, and individual batteries become something much larger. A volume of airspace an enemy simply cannot enter without paying a price. A bubble. The network is what makes this work. A single battery that loses its radar goes blind, but in a network, one sight can hand a target to another, and a missile from one launcher can be guided by a radar kilometers away. No single sensor has to stay switched on, and no single loss opens a hole. The hole is far harder to kill than any of its parts. This is what strategists mean by anti-access, area denial. It is not a wall. Aircraft can still fight their way in. It is a tax. Every kilometer of that bubble costs the attacker time, fuel, aircraft, and attention. And against a dense enough bubble, the cost can be high enough that the attack is simply never ordered at all. Which raises the obvious question. If you are the Air Force on the outside of that bubble, looking in at the most dangerous airspace on Earth, how do you ever get through it? The answer took 30 bloody years to learn. Air defense is not a theory. Almost everything we have just described was learned the hard way, in a handful of conflicts that rewrote the rules each time. The modern era arguably begins in 1960, when a high-altitude spy plane, flying far above the reach of every fighter, was knocked out of the sky by a surface-to-air missile. Overnight, altitude stopped being a hiding place. If you could be seen, you could be reached. A few years later, over Vietnam, those same missiles appeared by the hundreds. Aircraft that had owned the sky suddenly had to fly low to dodge them, straight into the guns. The losses forced an entirely new craft into being. Specialized crews whose only job was to hunt the missile sites themselves. They called them wild weasels, and their motto was as grim as the work. In 1973, a modern air force ran headfirst into a dense, layered belt of these systems and lost dozens of aircraft in a matter of days. It was the first real glimpse of the bubble done well. Overlapping coverage that punished every attempt to fly through it. The shock changed how air forces everywhere thought about the threat from the ground. And then, in 1982, the counterpunch. Over a single valley, one air force systematically took apart an entire air defense network, using drones as decoys to make the radars switch on. Missiles that homed in on those radar signals and jamming to blind the rest. In an afternoon, a feared bubble was gutted for almost no loss. It proved that a layered defense was not invincible, that with the right tools used together and in the right order, even a dense network could be peeled apart link by link. Every modern air campaign since has opened with some version of that same playbook. Which brings us back to that wet night in 1999. By then, stealth had become the new way through. If they cannot see you, they cannot start the chain. But a patient crew with an old system and clever tactics proved that even stealth was not magic. It narrowed the odds. It did not erase them. The bubble had adapted again. Today, the most heavily defended places on Earth bristle with overlapping mobile, networked systems that can pack up and move before a strike even arrives. The bubble is denser and smarter than ever, and the contest between the aircraft trying to get in and the network trying to keep it out is as undecided as it has ever been. So how do you actually beat it? Not with one trick, but with a whole toolkit. And every tool is really an attack on one specific link in that kill chain. The first and oldest answer is to attack the radar. A radar that is transmitting is shouting its exact location. Anti-radiation missiles are built to hear that shout and ride it all the way down to the dish. The mere threat of them changes behavior. Crews learn to switch their radars on for only seconds because staying on means dying. The second answer is to lie to the chain. Jamming floods the radars with noise so they cannot pull out a clean track. Decoys, small, cheap drones that look like aircraft on a screen, make the network engage ghosts, wasting missiles and revealing its own positions. Confuse the detect and track links, and the rest of the chain has nothing to shoot at. The third answer is to never be seen at all. Stealth attacks the very first link, detection, by giving the radar almost nothing to catch. It does not make an aircraft invisible, as 1999 proved, but it shrinks the range at which the chain can even begin. sometimes so much that by the time you are detected, it is already too late for the missile to matter. The fourth answer is the simplest of all. Never enter the bubble at all. Fire from outside it. Cruise missiles and long-range weapons let an aircraft strike a target from beyond the reach of its defenses, turning the whole problem around. If you can hit the network from outside its envelope, you never have to fly into it. The catch is cost. A long-range cruise missile can cost as much as a small aircraft, and you may need many of them. So staying outside the bubble is powerful but rarely cheap, which is exactly why air forces still invest in getting through it the hard way. And when subtlety fails, there is volume. Every battery has a finite number of missiles and can only guide so many at once. Send more targets than it can handle, real and fake, all at the same moment, and something always gets through. Saturation is expensive and ugly, but the math is on the attacker's side. Every one of these tools has a counter, and every counter has a counter of its own. Move your radars. Shoot, then scoot. Network your sensors so no single one ever has to stay on. The bubble and the strike package are locked in a permanent argument, and it never fully ends. So step back from the hardware for a moment. Here is why any of this actually matters. Air defense is the reason air power is not free. It is why the opening hours of a modern war are spent not bombing cities, but hunting radars and missile sites, because until the bubble is broken, nothing else is safe overhead. It is why smaller or poorer nations invest so heavily in it. A good air defense network is the cheapest way to make a stronger air force think twice. It is the great equalizer of the sky. A country that could never hope to match a major power aircraft for aircraft can still, with enough radars and missiles, turn its own airspace into a place that power does not want to enter. That is why the spread of modern air defenses is quietly reshaping where the strong are willing to fight at all. The ground cannot win a war on its own, but it can decide, kilometer by kilometer, where the war in the air is even allowed to happen. Last time, we looked at the aircraft that gives an air force its reach. This time, the network that takes that reach away. Reach and denial, the two halves of who really controls the sky. Until next time, watch the ground. It is always watching you.